Okay, now that we finished waxing the custom post, we're gonna start the spruing procedure along with the screw retained crown here. What I like to do is I like to take an 8-gauge sprue, cut about a half an inch off of it, and I like to make a diagonal cut on the end of the sprue. So when we sprue it, we're going to sprue it at about a 45-degree angle on the labial surface of the post. We're going to place this sprue on the labial surface so that the sprue is just below the incisal edge, just like so. Just like this. This one we actually attach the sprue it's gonna give us an exact line to where the sprue attaches to the post. This way, when we cut off the sprue after the pressing, we're going to know more precisely of where to cut the sprue off. When we reinforce the sprue, we make sure that we blend the wax into the wax pattern. This way, when the material goes into the form, it will not break off any of the investment material at the junction of the wax up. Now with the molar wax up, we're going to do the same thing with the sprue, just a slightly less of an angle, and we're going to position this 45 degrees to the occlusal and also 45 degrees to the mesial. So the angle will be like this. If we look at it from here, it will be on an upward direction, and when we look at it from here, it will also be in a mesial direction. and we're going to place it slightly below the occlusion. You have to make sure that this is hot enough to melt some of the sprue wax. So as we see, it faces a little bit mesially, about a 45-degree angle, and also if we look at it from the posterior, it also faces up at about a 45-degree angle. And of course we have to blend it in just like we did with the other teeth. We don't want to have any sharp angles. And we shall remove the wax up and let it cool. The next step is going to be the removal of the titanium bases. For this project, what we're going to do is we're going to heat up the titanium base and then pull it off the wax up carefully so that the wax up has a nice finish line, sort of like the margin of a crown. Since the titanium base is shiny on the bottom, our aim is for the wax up to also be shiny. That's how we know it's all the way adapted to the titanium base. So we're gonna do the same to all of them. Going to remove the titanium bases. Once it's heated up a little bit, don't overheat it, you can turn it and then we can pull it out. If you have trouble pulling it out, you can always screw an analog on the titanium base so you have more of a handle on it. With the small screw, like this is going to take a little bit longer for the titanium base to heat up, since we have to heat up the entire implant analog. So once that's heated up, we turn it and we slowly pull it out. This came out pretty easily. So now we're ready to place this and the other wax patterns on the sprue former. Okay, so this is the sprue former for the Emax system. So the first thing we do is we're going to fill up this hole here with wax. We could use any kind of wax. We could use base plate wax, inlay wax, any wax that burns out clean. And we fill it up exactly to the top of the plastic former. At first, sometimes the wax kind of shrinks a little bit, so we could add a little bit more to it. But don't add over the plastic. You can wait for it to cool down, or we can blow on it, or you can use compressed air. The next important thing is that from the surface, the top surface of this former to the very top of the wax pattern should be about 15 millimeters. You may go to 16 if you absolutely have to, but keeping it at 15 is a safe distance. So we need to get our little ruler, and we can measure more or less 15. So if we put the wax pattern on here, we measure to the top of the pattern from the top of the plastic former, and this is more like 20 millimeters. So I know that we have to cut most of this sprue off. So I'm going to cut a little more than half of it off. So we're going to end up with a very short sprue like this. So we're going to place this pattern on the sprue former, in a way that this hole that is made by the titanium base is facing upward. Now it must be facing upward so it will facilitate the pour of the investment. As the investment rises in the ring, it will flow through that hole more easily if it's pointing up. This way we don't have to constantly tilt the ring in order to make the investment flow through that hole without any bubbles. So I just temporarily attached it with a little bit of wax, and now we're going to measure it. What I did with this ruler is I cut the edge of it off to the first red line which says 0. This allows us to more easily measure from the top surface. So I'm going to place the ruler right on the top, and I'm going to see where this is. And I see that the wax pattern is at about 17. So what I'm going to do is we're going to remove this and take a little bit more off the sprue. And this should do. And we're going to measure it again. This is about 15. If you notice, that first long line past 10 is the 15 mark. So now it will be much easier to kind of eyeball the rest of the wax patterns, since we have this one set at 15 already. So we know that the rest of the wax patterns should not go above this one. When we wax this up on the top of the former, do not pull the wax over the side of the former. Stay on top, because the ingot is the exact same shape as the bottom of the former here. So when this gets removed and we have a space in the investment material, that ingot will fit exactly in the space. And we do not want any Emax material to flow between the plunger and the space between the investment. Between the space, we don't want the Emax material to flow between the investment and the plunger. So now we can cut some of this sprue off. So it's going to be fairly short. We should have about 3 millimeters of space between the wax patterns. If we have smaller amount of space than that, there's a chance that the investment might break down between the patterns. And if that happens, then the patterns will be joined by Emax material, which will be more difficult and time consuming to separate. If you feel that this one is a little bit close to it, like I think that this is, I'm just going to heat up a little bit of this sprue here so that we can tilt this wax pattern away from this one, just like that, slowly, so it doesn't break off. Now we're gonna fill that material with more wax. And we'll be ready to put on our third pattern. And let's put it in. Looks like we may have to move this one a little bit more this way. So what we'll do is we're going to heat this up on this side, and we're going to move it a little bit, and again we're going to heat it up, and blend it together so it's nice and smooth. Now let's see if this one is good. Okay, so this should be good. We attach it completely and blend everything together. And we are all attached. And as we can see, the holes are facing upwards, so it will be very easy for the investment material to come up. Now, pressing Emacs is a little bit of a different theory than casting metal. Casting metal, we place the wax patterns outside the heat zone. With Emacs, we place the wax pattern inside the heat zone because we want it to be the hottest they can possibly be, or the hottest they should be for the amount of time it's pressing in the oven. With metal, we want to control the cooling so there's no suckback porosity from the button. So we must place the wax pattern for metal casting outside the heat zone so they will cool first. And we don't have that sort of a problem with Emacs material or any other pressable ceramic material. So now we will put the ring on it, and if we take a careful look, we can see a line here, and when we pour the investment material, this is where we stop. When the investment material reaches this part, this line, we stop the pour. And then we put this top cap on the ring. This top cap helps us size the investment material so that they're all on an even size. This way the machine, when it presses, it all presses it at an even pressure so that all of the presses are predictable. So when we place this cap on, the investment material should squirt out from here, and it should not be too much material so it goes all the way around, but it should be just like a little button that comes over this hole. Now, as you can see, now you can visualize it, that as we pour the material in here, as the investment starts coming up, it will come through the holes by themselves. We will not have to take an instrument and put investment in the hole. If we try to do that, we may trap an air bubble that will permanently damage the press. Not the press machine, but it will permanently damage your project, because if there's a bubble in there, that means that the Emacs material will fill up that bubble and you will not have the hole for the screw access. So just let the investment material come up and come through the holes and fill it up to the indicator line, And then once you've done that, you can put the top cap on. If there's no investment material coming through this hole, that means you didn't put enough investment material. So just remove the top quickly, add a little more material, and place the top back, and it should squirt out. So now it's time to invest.